Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best dungeon masters on this plane of existence. Before we get started, a big thank you to my patrons. You help make this show possible. If you'd like to support the show, want a shout out on my next episode, or want an inside scoop on my upcoming guests, consider joining. You can find the link in my episode notes, my Linktree, or by heading to patreon.com/HN2DM. Lastly, as of January 2022, 10% of the money I bring in from ads and supporters like you will be donated to Encircle, a nonprofit organization with the mission to bring the family and community together to enable LGBTQ+ youth to thrive. For more information on Encircle, check out my Linktree or my episode notes. And now on to this episode's guest intro. Sam has been creating TTRPG content for a year and a half now, including a podcast, Roleplaying and Rollplaying, now in its second season, TTRPG memes, a Kickstarter project, and more. The R&R Twitter account is well over 27,000 followers at the time of me recording this, which means it's probably grown more since. Sam has some great tips on the account's rapid growth, but also how he may have done things a little differently if he could go back in time. Enjoy!
Yeah, so hi, my name's Sam. I run Roleplaying and Rollplaying, as in the Twitter and the first season of the podcast. How did I get into TTRPGs? That's a fantastic question. I started playing D&D, specifically 5e, when I was a freshman in high school, and my uncle got me into it. Invited my brother and I over to his house to play a session. And we're like, okay, now it takes me a very short amount of time to just whip out a character because I do it all the time. But back then, I took hours creating this warlock. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then we got TPK'd in the first session. So that was my first experience with tabletop games, just getting absolutely nuked. Yeah. And I've been hooked ever since. It's been a great experience.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's funny. There's kind of like two camps of people. There's the people who die in the first session and don't ever want to play again, and then there's the people who are like, oh, I gotta keep doing this. So it's good that you're that type.
Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, so it was just a wonderful experience all around.
Yeah, and as a person who decided to start a podcast, you feel that as well. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit.
Seriously.
Yeah. All right, so how did you start running games for other people then? You started playing with your uncle back in the day, but yeah, when was the first game you ran? Kind of how did you get into it, and how did that go?
This was kind of like the band Heart?
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin or whatever. Whichever one ended up being, the singer had gotten a guitar for her birthday, but then her sister ended up becoming this guitar virtuoso. I'm not a virtuoso of a DM, but I got much more into D&D than my brother, who was gifted D&D stuff for his birthday. So I just kind of took all of his stuff, and I decided okay, I'm going to run this little thing for some friends, and it was horrible. It was bad. I felt like an idiot, and I sucked. I didn't do any voices. The ones that I tried were squeaky because I was in high school, and generally just a horrible experience. But yeah, just classic high fantasy. Sucked so bad. I don't know what inspired me to come back, but something did. And now I love DMing and GMing, really, any system. It's been a really good experience. I think I started DMing about a few months to a year after I started playing, if I'm correct. I don't know. Nobody else would know that but me. I don't even remember, but it's something like that.
That's a good anecdote about the band Heart. That's some deep knowledge there. But I like the story you're telling there. So yeah, nice. All right. So the big question is your mistakes that you've made while running games. So everybody's made them, from the best to the worst. What do you feel like are some of the big mistakes you've made, both early on and recently, that people can learn from? And these can be specific instances, or they can be big kind of overarching things as part of your game.
So I think my earliest and probably most egregious mistake was I originally made the games about me, my plot, my world, whatever, and the players were secondary. And that's not enjoyable for anyone except for me. And at that point, when nobody else is enjoying it, I'm not either. That was a horrible mistake, right? I mean, because then the world that I wanted people to enjoy and get invested in suddenly felt forced.
Yeah.
That was my worst mistake by far. As of recently, I kind of let my players get away with too much now. I've kind of flipped. Because I mean, I have a game that's like set in space. I have this pretty serious arc going for it. And I've essentially just scrapped that because the players just wanted it to be funny. I'm like, okay, whatever. Matt Damon shows up in a cryopod. In that moment when I decided that happened, I'm like, yeah, this is a comedy campaign now. I've screwed myself. There's no coming back from this.
That's awesome. Does he try to shill crypto then too in the future?
He's actually broke because his crypto didn't pan out in the future. So he's completely broke after a series of bad investments.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
man, that's so funny. It's a little bit of Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Matt Damon and Cryopod. See, these are the reasons why I want to run a sci-fi campaign. I haven't done it yet, but there's just so much crazy stuff you can do like this.
Oh, yeah.
That are not available to you without really breaking immersion in a fantasy campaign. So
yeah, I've been using Fate. Like, this is my first time trying Fate, and it is so cool. Like, the consequence system is awesome. It is so much better than just damage in D&D, because you could be like, oh, okay, you want to take a mild consequence or like a severe consequence, your arm is gone, good luck getting a new one. So yeah, it's a lot more permanent. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's high stakes.
Yeah.
All right. So, opposite of the worst things that you've done or worst parts of your game, what are some of your favorite parts of playing and maybe some of your favorite memories around the table? And it could be as a player or running the game. Both are good options here.
Favorite parts. I really, really like it when players get invested. And especially when I'm a DM, if I get a game to that level where they feel invested enough, where they remember NPCs' names, they can recap the plot, right? I know I've done a good job. I feel happy about that. And obviously, that's not mandatory. But more and more often, I've been wanting to run more serious games, not in terms of like, oh, it's this grim dark thing, low fantasy where if he dies kind of thing, but more so like seriousness in terms of how serious you're taking the world. So it's not like, oh, okay, let's just role play and make up some city called Poop Fartburg. This one group that I have, they're just phenomenal. They take the world very seriously, and that's allowed me to do really cool things that I wouldn't have been able to do. They enabled that for me, which I really appreciate. And I gotta say, yeah, those are probably my favorite moments when the game is taken not necessarily seriously, but it's taken fully. You're immersed, right? Like your immersion isn't broken now.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I was in a cyberpunk campaign with Alex, who's one of the players on the pod, who's DMing this second season, and I was like a crooked politician, and I had a talk with like this cop about like rigging the elections and stuff like that, and it was so much fun just because we were both invested in it. Those moments of pure raw investiture in a world really get my goat. They're great. And I'm a chronic world builder, character, mancer person. So seeing people get involved with stuff I make is awesome. And I love getting involved in stuff other people make because it's cool and it's fun. So those are definitely my best memories. And then, I mean, there's just the stuff where you're laughing really, really hard because of some thing like the goblin who wears no pants or something like that. I don't know. But those are great. Those are just moments I'll remember because they're fun and I cried laughing. The duality of the game is just like a windshield wiper, just back and forth at all times.
Yeah, it's funny how you can produce both feelings even within the space of a few minutes, right? With the way that the game works. Yeah. That does sound like a lot of fun. I like what you said about people being invested in what you've made, but also getting invested in what other people have made. I think there's a lot to be said about what you get out of both of those situations. So yeah, I like that. How many games are you currently running? Or I guess what's the most amount you've ever run at one time?
Oh, I was running 7 and I was in 12.
Wait.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd have some double headers because I had nothing else to do. And I was taking a gap year between high school and college. So I just had work during the day and I had nothing else to do. So I'm like, people are like, hey, you want to join my game? Yeah, I do. I've got nothing else going on. And
what did you do for work?
Back then, it was like DoorDash and like Shipt. Okay. So even then, my schedule was flexible.
Plenty of time to think
Plenty of time to think about it all.
That might be doable. Still, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was a lot. The podcast was barely an inkling in my mind at that point. I was just like, let's get as far away from the current reality as we possibly can through as many facets. Now, though, it's a lot more calm. I'm running, I think, just 2 games, but I'm in, obviously, the podcast. I'm in a few, like, mini campaigns right now with some people from the Twitter space that I'm very excited about. But, yeah, and then people were like, hey, you want to play a one-shot? And I'm like, I'll never say no to a one-shot, man. I'll bring in my goblin who says, I'm going to poop your pants. Like, I mean, that's my perfect one-shot character. I pull them out, and people are like, oh, that's horrifying. Why would you ever do that? You're a monster.
Then they don't invite you back.
No, either they do or they don't.
Depending on how well it goes. Yeah,
I mean, the real ones invite me back. Let's be clear.
That's true. Well, 7 and then 12, that might be the most I've heard thus far. So props to you. That's quite the feat.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is.
Wouldn't recommend it. I was mixing up characters as NPCs from different games. It was a lot. Yeah.
Oh, geez. All right. So who do you feel like have been the greatest influences in your style of running games? You have kind of started within the past, well, not few years here, but you're a more recent addition to the TTRPG sphere like myself. So I feel like there's kind of been there's a lot more options of places to go to get advice and information on the way, to do things. So yeah, what are some of the sources you've gone to or people you've looked up to?
Brennan Lee Mulligan is without a doubt my biggest source of inspiration. The man is, I don't know how he knows so much about so many topics. It is insane. But yeah, that he can pull off a story and just complete control over just the tonal shifts in his game without skipping a beat. That is, to me, just incredible. Granted, his cast is absolutely phenomenal, but
always
it's incredible to watch. And Griffin McElroy is probably, to a lesser extent, but still quite a bit, another really big inspiration, especially with how he handles tangents within his group. That's been kind of a big inspiration for role-playing and role-playing because, tangents are a lot of fun sometimes, you just gotta get off topic. And that's kind of where I take inspiration for that side of things. But mostly Brennan.
Yeah, he is just, I don't even know how to put it, but if whoever's listening to this hasn't gone and checked out some of the original campaigns that are available for free on YouTube or on podcasting platforms, go check out Dimension 20 and watch a master at work. Like you said, he embodies the character so well, and he just switches to their vernacular or their lingo so quickly too. Like, what is a principal going to say versus what is a cop going to say? And he uses the words and the phrases that you like. I guess you hear them on TV and stuff, but he's just so good at picking them up at the drop of a hat and going into that mode and then switching around, and it's incredible.
Oh yeah, it's something else. It's something else entirely.
It really is. This episode of How Not to DM is brought to you by Gemmed Firefly. Need a fresh new look for the new year? Head on over to gemmedfirefly.com for the newest tees, mugs, and home goods styled with D&D gamer humor and aesthetics. As always, Gemmed Firefly makes every shirt to order, bringing you all of the softest and most comfortable shirts that thousands have come to love. And now, listeners of the show get a discount when you use the code DRAGON at checkout. Find your new favorite shirt at gemmedfirefly.com. And now, let's return to the show, starting up with a brand new minigame for Season 2.
Welcome to Quickfire Chaos!
This week on Quickfire Chaos, Sam and I are going to use some random generators and dice rolls to pick a setting, theme, and goal to use in designing a TTRPG campaign. So, to start off, our setting is Western, which is quite appropriate.
Very nice.
Along with your second season you guys are doing over at Roleplaying and Rollplaying. The theme is tragedy, so a tragic Western story here. Now, the character goals. Do you have your dice with you? And if not, I can just roll one for you. You got some?
Of course I do.
No one yet has said, "Oh, I don't have my dice near me." Everyone always has them. So,
What am I pulling out?
So roll a D8 for me.
D8.
D10, sorry, D10, and it's going to tell us what the goal is of this game.
5.
To explore the unexplored. Okay, so we've got a Western. It's going to be a tragedy, and the kind of overarching goal of the players to start, at least, is to explore the unexplored. So, Sam, with those in mind, how would you start kind of putting together the skeletons of what will be this epic campaign we're going to play?
I suppose I want to ask a constraining question.
Yes.
When it comes to exploring the unexplored, is that more of a physical thing where we are finding a place and it leads us to somewhere? Or is it exploring parts of ourselves, parts of our minds that we haven't explored, perhaps redemption or revenge or something like that, something more abstract?
I say go for the abstract if you want to. Yeah, that sounds... I mean, you could go both ways, so yeah, take what seems more interesting.
Whew. Okay. So, I guess, in terms of exploring the unexplored, I mean, a Western tragedy, what comes to mind immediately for me, I'm a big Western fan, but for Western tragedy, I think of The Unforgiven. Phenomenal film, really, really dark. And I think about just, I mean, for me, a Western is more than just a setting. You know, it's not just post-Civil War in the usual southwestern part of the United States, what have you, dust, deserts. It's like a concept. It's these simple story beats, these simple plots with complex characters that are trying to realize something about themselves, such as redemption, revenge, what have you. I mean, Logan, the Wolverine movie, could be considered a Western. No Country for Old Men is a Western.
Definitely.
Hell or High Water, definitely a neo-Western.
A few more examples that are recent are like The Mandalorian and Boba Fett, even though they're based on a desert planet, and it kind of gives that flavor. Those are considered space westerns, you know, so you're right, it doesn't have to be a specific setting to be a Western.
But to keep it simple, let's have it be a desert area. Let's make it that it's a disk planet, like Discworld. It's like a desert disk. And the reason why there's no water is because it's all flown off the edges of this disk, because there's no way to constrain it.
I love it.
So we have this sandy disk with barely any water left. And there's a legend of a supposed wellspring, because most of the water comes from off-world. It's an exploitive system from a disk that has managed to build walls around the edges to keep in their water, which allows them to recycle it and what have you, and export it to this one, which is, of course, very poor because it's not rich in said resources. And it's very, I'd say, Mad Max-esque. I wouldn't go as far as an apocalypse, but there are definitely these dystopian groups and these relationships between them that are very tense, if not overtly hostile. And I think our characters are simply trying to find this spring, because they have lost all other semblance of hope. There's nothing else for them. The price of water is getting too high, and in a last-ditch effort to find something they don't even know exists, it might actually save them. The tragedy is it doesn't. It doesn't exist. But out of this tragedy, out of the fact that this spring never existed in the first place, they grow closer to each other in this trial by fire. And they come to realize that the issue isn't the water not being here. The issue is the water needing to come from somewhere else. It's the system. And they finally learn that in order to fight that, they have to band together. They have to act as a unified group in order to combat that. So that's my off the dome desert disc thing. So yeah, so that's what I got.
That's perfect. I love it. So many compelling storylines you could tell, so many different factions you could include, a lot of different themes you could explore. I think you've got at least a level 1 to 10 story right there.
I'll take it. Definitely pulled a Brennan by having an anti-capitalist vibe in there. But,
well, you
take
got
the greats.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You've got to. Okay, especially Westerns. I feel like Westerns always have that kind of theme to them, too. You've got the robber baron on the train, or you've got the person who owns half the town, or you've got the people who own the water. Yeah, love it. All right, let's transition now to your personal projects and your work, Sam. So role-playing and role-playing, you've talked about it a couple of times. Tell us about what it is and how it started and how it's going.
Roleplaying and Rollplaying is a podcast and Twitter account. I'm not going to say that it's one or the other because it's kind of become both at this stage, and it's hard to kind of push them together. How did it start? Roleplaying and Rollplaying was kind of this spur-of-the-moment thing. I, for the vast majority of my life, have not been very ambitious. I haven't been able to stick to projects very well. And I decided, what's another ADHD hyperfixation for a month? And I reached out to 2 separate friend groups of mine, and I said, hey, you guys want to make a D&D podcast? Have a little bit of fun, And they're like, yeah, sure. And so we set this thing up. It sounded so bad because we recorded with a Discord bot and Apple headphones. So if you listen to the first episode of the first season, that is why it sounds so bad. We hadn't figured out how to use local audio because none of us did any research. And I just ran a high fantasy campaign. And originally, the big gimmick of our little podcast, the big twist, was that the big bad evil guy was going to be played by my girlfriend at the time behind the scenes. So her real actions would indeed affect the players as opposed to me playing the character in a way that could be influenced by where I wanted the plot to go. That didn't work out, as we did break up like a month after the podcast started. So, but
it's a good idea, though.
It could have had some wings, but these things happen. We're still friends now, so it wasn't like a horrible breakup or anything. But I decided I could either become super depressed from this, it was like a year and a half. It was like my longest relationship. And I was like, okay, I can either become depressed or I can fully throw every bit of myself into this project, which I'd never done before. And I just decided to jump with 2 feet. And it kind of took off. The way we got big on Twitter was I would just make these, originally I'd make these little dialogue posts, like, oh, the GM says this, the player says this, haha, funny punchline after 5 lines. And I'd post it to Reddit. And the majority of people would like them. And then I get a bunch of comments that said, oh, go back to Twitter, this sucks. But it didn't matter because people would follow me on Twitter. Yeah,
Yeah.
Reddit is a hellscape. It is horrible.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, Twitter's not much better, to be fair. But
That's true. It's gotten bad.
so these memes that I cross posted started to generate me some followers, and by the time December rolled around, I got to 1,000. I'm like, whoa, Mr. King in the Castle, 1,000 followers. You're doing pretty good. And then the poop just kind of hit the fan because January 1st, actually, New Year's Day was when the first idea bloomed, like the turd blossom that it was. I forget what the idea even was, but from the beginning, the series of ideas was meant to be tongue-in-cheek humor. It's originally it was also self-deprecating, you know, but it's grown out of that phase at this point. And as time went on, I'm like, hold on, I think I might be onto something here. This might be my thing. And it was, apparently. We started really picking up steam, especially in April to like July. I think we got like 10,000 followers in that time frame. Something wacky. It's been insane. I think I've made over 2,000 at this point. I post them daily. There are so many. It is a nonstop process to try to think of something that is even slightly different than what I've previously posted. It's just kind of become its own thing. I mean, if we had the amount of listeners that we do followers on Twitter, we'd be a large podcast, but we don't. Not remotely. Because
You be top 15, top 10-ish, yeah.
I wish. But me being an ad man and not a marketing person, I forgot to market the podcast most times. So I was just focused on like the growth of like the account. 'Cause I'm like, ooh, pretty numbers are fun. They're big. So I just kept going for the next milestone, the next milestone. And then like recently, the cast is like, you don't promote the podcast that much. I'm like, oh no, what have I done? So I've kind of backpedaled on that a little bit of late and have actually started promoting the show. But that is why there are two separate role-playing and role-playings, essentially. There's the Twitter account with the shitty ideas and the jokes, and then there's the podcast, which is equally irreverent in a different way.
Yeah, I don't mean to play into your insecurities, but it was a long time before I realized that you had a podcast.
I know.
It was just the jokes that I was
Believe me.
that I was there for. So
I think that actually helped me grow, not mentioning that we were a podcast. Because if people just think you're a meme account, they're going to follow you for the memes, right? But if you mention that this is like, oh, this is a podcast about, people are going to be like, okay, it's a podcast account, So I think that kind of saved me a little bit by accident. That was not intentional at all. But yeah, we're marketing our podcast for real now, more than a year into the Twitter account's activity. So yeah, it's been a weird ride. It's been a weird ride indeed. We have season 2 going on right now. We're starting plans for really we have a lot of stuff going on, especially for upcoming seasons that I really think will be cool. I'm hoping. Who knows? I mean, you don't know until the future comes, but I think what we have coming up is going to be actually marketable, I suppose, as opposed to like, listen to our podcast, it's right here. Which, as you know, it sucks so much to market a podcast. It is so difficult to get those listens.
yeah, I mean, the good news is I like what I do and I feel like it's worthwhile for people to listen to. So it's not hard for me to tell people, hey, you should listen because I'm proud of what I've made. But it does suck that like you feel like you have to do that all the time and you can't just like make friends and post memes, right? Like, yeah, it's a weird dichotomy. I get it though. I have kind of not struggled, but I've found the same thing you're describing. Like it's easy to not easy. It is not easy to think of memes all day, every day. But when you post memes, it's easy to gain followers and get engagement that way. or easier than, hey, here's a clip from my latest show that talks about X, Y, and Z with this guest, and you will learn some things from it. Like, it's easier just to like retweet a meme and laugh about it and keep scrolling. So yeah, it's just something you've got to deal with. But yeah, I'd love to know, other than like kind of stumbling through it, what do you feel like have been some of the key things that have helped your social media presence grow that you would suggest other people try out if they're kind of trying to do that themselves?
I think the biggest thing that has kind of gained us the following that it has is 100% original content. I have not, I in my memory, it might have happened early on. As far as I'm aware, I have not ever posted something that somebody else has made without any edits. I will always make my own memes. I always make my own dialogue. Will I repost stuff? Yeah, of course, because I'm not creative 100% of the time. But it's all my own stuff, and that kind of creates this place, this kind of nexus of like, here's where to get the original content, as opposed to like, oh, okay, here's a meme I saw on Reddit, you know? And especially with like just having your handle on that, that does a lot, because once you pass like a certain threshold, your stuff is on Facebook with those big meme accounts that just share things. It's on Instagram, and it's on iFunny, which is horrible, but it goes there anyways.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that
I feel like it's hard to find meme accounts. Like, I don't know, whenever I see meme accounts that are making D&D jokes or whatever, like 90% of them are ones I've already seen before. So there's not a lot of people out there making, well, I mean, there's got to be someone making new ones, but not as many as you'd think. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity there, like you're saying.
Yeah. I also got lucky. I mean, I'm not going to say that this was all skill, because it's 1,000,000% not. But when I joined the Twitter sphere, I did it at the golden time. October of 2020 was like the perfect time to cross promote from Reddit to Twitter, because it was kind of new for Twitter accounts to post their stuff there. It wasn't like a rehash, like, oh, get these Twitter accounts out of Reddit, they're ruining Reddit. I just happened to be one of the first to get to that scene. Me, Oregon, Roll to 20, Bork's memes. For a while, that was like just our scene. I would like post a meme every day. Not even a meme, usually it was like just a text post that had my handle on it. And it would get so many upvotes. And that would really help growth. Like the cross promotion of your stuff was so crucial in the beginning. Obviously, now I don't need to do it. People do it for me just because they want karma on Reddit and they know that they can post my stuff for karma. I hate Reddit, but they it's just, you have to really consider that sheer amount of engagement in the beginning is good, but my mistake was thinking that was the only metric, because I don't run a meme account, I run a podcast account. And I forgot about that, you know? That I think has been my biggest mistake. It's kind of almost pigeonholed me into this place where it's going to be a little tough to dig myself out. I have the audience. Whether or not they're actually going to want to listen to what I have to say is another thing.
Just a quick content warning for the next 7 minutes here. Sam has been working on a Kickstarter named for a successful meme series of his that includes some mild language. If you'd rather not explain that to young ears around you, skip ahead 7 or so minutes for the next question. Yeah. So I know you have a Kickstarter project that's in the works that is kind of doing that. It's trying to capitalize on your audience that may have showed up for the memes and not necessarily for the podcast. So let's talk about that and kind of how you're trying to kind of capture the audience you've got.
Yeah. So I'm going to swear again. The shitty not compendium is a really weird project for me, because originally I didn't want to do it, but people asked me, when's the compendium of shitty ideas coming out? And I'd laugh it off like, oh, this is a dumb idea, probably like 2025 or something like that. But my dad, who really has been supportive of me and will even send me some shitty ideas through DMs. He's like, here's a good one that I made. And I'm like, that's pretty good. I'll post
Nice.
it. He said, no, you idiot. Why aren't you doing this? You could be making money right now from something just super simple. I'm like, oh, money. Yeah, I'm a college student. That would be nice. So I decided I just took 20 ideas from each class for spells, monsters, plot hooks, and I compiled them. I added some helpful flavor text on how you, the reader, can make your own shitty ideas. I got an artist on board, I got a consultant, and then we just kind of threw it against the wall. And it stuck. Surprisingly, I didn't think this would go anywhere, but we funded within the first 6 hours. And we ended up making 276% of our goal, I think was the metric. So yeah, that's been good. That really helped. Obviously, the book itself isn't finished. I've written all of it, but the art's just going to take a while because there's a lot of it. But it's insane to me that it worked because this book had no stat blocks, no math. It was just ideas. It's like the Lego Ideas book, but like worse.
Good callback, yeah. You know, though, I think sometimes that's what people want. As a DM, like, I don't know what the percentage of people out there who homebrew versus playthrough, like written adventures is, but I would guess that more than half of games out there are probably homebrew games. And honestly, yeah, from a DM's perspective, I don't like go looking for specific stat blocks to fit my needs. I go looking for ideas and then I make up the stat blocks. It's not hard to make up some numbers and kind of add it just based on the flavor that you read. So I think that it is really a very valuable part of helping people think of new things to do in their games is to just give them ideas and starting points. But yeah, especially because oftentimes people twist them and change them slightly to match their own needs. And so when you're giving them stat blocks, that's just another step for them to have to shoehorn instead of starting it themselves. But yeah, I honestly think that there's a reason why you were so successful because it's something that a lot of people like to have.
Yeah, it was certainly a risk because I had no idea if that like really kind of direct non-math approach to D&D was going to work. But I mean, they're just ideas, you know? You can take them, you could use them how you want. Retrofitting stuff to D&D is the best way to get good ideas, you know? Or any TTRPG, really. It shouldn't just be relegated to D&D. But I've always been a proponent that just because something is original doesn't mean it's good, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Because people will try to make these original characters, and I applaud them for it because it's really, really hard because everything has been done these days. But it shouldn't be a bad thing to make a non-original concept, you know? Like, you can make that fighter who throws their shield, who is very lawful good, you know?
And
patriotic
yeah.
and maybe is a captain. Who knows? But it's not about character concepts in tabletop games. At least for me, it's all about the execution of those ideas. Because you could have two captain insert your country name here that are run so very differently in the exact same setting. It's just those experiences, it's the people who run them, those minute choices that just the butterfly effect of things that happen in a game are so essential to the little tiny bits that change a concept to a unique reality, you know? I think that the Shitty Not Compendium is really kind of big on that. Like, I'm saying, please take these ideas, do what you need to do with them, take them at face value if you want, as long as you have fun and make them unique through your own vicarious experience. That's all that matters.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm excited to see when that comes out and see the reviews roll in. I'm sure they will be good. So, as far as the podcast side of things, do you have advice for people who are thinking about starting a show or who have started a show but are kind of looking for ways to take it to the next level? You mentioned you started out and the audio wasn't good, but you've improved leaps and bounds. So yeah, walk us through some of your advice for people looking to podcast.
Yeah. So first things first, you really should use localized audio. Don't use a Discord bot. Dear Lord, do not use a Discord bot because it will fade in and out when people are talking. It will sound generally bad. Skype, like video recording, is a little less bad. Zoom and whatnot is a little less bad. But if you get those remote, just exclusive pieces of audio that you can individually edit and silence, it's going to take so much longer to edit, I know. But oh my Lord, will it sound better. It is a world of difference to have people talking in not a vacuum. You got to have a little bit of background noise to make it not uncomfortable, but just having that without sneezes in the background or people crinkling a bag of Cheetos it ups the production quality a ton. And I mean, we still don't sound professional. We're a bunch of college students with Amazon mics, but if you're going to go into that, don't get the $50 mic if you want to. It's a great starting point. But understand if you want to really jump into this stuff, go for the 300, go for the 400 with like the XLR adapter or whatever, because it might just be me, but sound quality on a podcast is so much of it. If it sounds grainy and stuff, I am so much more likely to just drop it instantly.
It's hard to admit that too, as people who started out with not great audio, like me and you, like it's tough, but it's true.
I remember I was editing my first episode. I'm like, I hate this so much. We sound so bad. I can't believe we're putting this out. And then 5 sessions later, I'm like, oh, thank God. Finally, we've got something that people can listen to in a car without it blowing out their bass or just sounding generally disgusting. And that's just kind of a harsh reality. I don't want to be mean and be like, oh yeah, if your audio quality is bad, you have a bad podcast. That's not true. But it will be worse than it can be, Another thing, D&D podcasts, make the game for you. Always make sure the game is for you. Always make sure you're playing it because you enjoy it. But never forget that there is an audience. That meaning when you talk, when you are doing a fun little monologue, as a DM, write a script for a new area. Write that script for that city you come up on so you're not saying ums and ahs, because it sounds better and you can pace yourself. You don't need to say something in one take with a bunch of ums and ahs. You can just say, okay, I messed up. Let me try that again. I know what I want to say now, and do it all in one take, because you can cut that stuff out. And you'll sound like some Toastmaster extraordinaire whipping out these words with no verbal fillers or anything. And people are like, oh my goodness, this guy could do my eulogy and it would sound great. I don't even know the fella. And post is your friend. Post-production is such a godsend. I don't understand how people can stream because post-production is so good. Music especially is huge. Adding music will do so much for your podcast. I cannot even begin to stress it, because it takes just a conversation or especially a lore dump that you're doing and elevates it into something that much more interesting. Also understand this is a huge time suck. You will spend hours a week on it, and you will most likely hate editing unless you are some kind of sociopath. Yeah, that's kind of my advice.
Yeah, I don't think I realized the editing time it was going to take me until I started it, and I was like, oh wow, this takes a lot of time, but I had committed to it, So it does take a lot of time though, you're right.
Yeah, especially keep in mind if you have more players, that's more story beats you got to work on, that's more relationships you got to work on, and that's one more track you gotta edit. It's that simple.
Yeah. All right. So you talked about you kind of the DM of season 1, which was a high fantasy story. So tell us a little bit about the Sinner's Saga season 2 for role-playing and role-playing.
Season 2 is different because it sounds good. First off, it sounds decent. Additionally, it's a lot more. Well, I mean, obviously, it's a Western. It's Weird West. It's magic in the West, which is a fun concept.
Mhm.
It's Deadlands-esque. It's kind of got this Mad Max vibe where this organization called the Hydro Collective owns and distributes all of the water in this kind of post-war society. There's some geopolitics, not nearly as much in the first campaign because I am obsessed with geopolitics, much to the detriment of my campaigns. That's another mistake. Obsession with geopolitics. And the party in this season is a lot more interesting than the one the last season. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a part of the party this time, even though it might sound like it. I'm not. This is a really cool party. I'm excited that I don't know really anybody's deepest, darkest backstories at this point because it's got this mysterious vibe to it. There's some horror elements, especially in the first part of it, that I was a little not concerned, but like just surprised by because I'm not running this. I'm like, oh, he's taking it in a horror direction. Okay, I suppose we can do this. So yeah, the first part of it is kind of spooky. That sets it apart. And I think the tonal whiplash, we've toned it down from the absolutely chaotic buffet of swearing and references of last season. We've kind of dialed it back a little bit to make it more listenable. It's kind of the deal. I don't want to spoil the plot of it because it's really cool. And Alex, our DM, has worked very hard on it. Apparently, there's a lot of stuff to do with microbiology that comes up, and it's pretty dope. So I'm excited to play it. I'm excited to finish the season, and I'm excited for anyone to give it a listen.
Cool. You mentioned you've got a couple of other projects on the horizon. Anything you can share with us?
I'm not entirely sure because I'm not running them. I'm a part of them. So I don't know if I've been sworn to secrecy or anything. But I will be on some new streams. Also, if you want to have me on a stream or something, just reach out. I enjoy this kind of stuff. And I don't know. Shoot, what can I say? I don't know if I can.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Let's not get you in trouble. Oh, man. Everyone's got their secrets, right? So I feel like all of my guests have had at least one or two things they can't say anything about. All right. So you talked about advice for podcasters. How about advice for DMs and GMs? If you had to kind of distill down, all of the thoughts and ideas in your head into a few key points to recommend to people, what would they be?
My advice to, I guess, just generally masters, game masters, dungeon masters, the whole shtick. Never take yourself seriously. Never try to overthink something. Never try to really grapple with what you think your players are going to do next. Because if you're taking it that seriously, it's going to hurt you. Because you cannot, and I promise you, you cannot possibly predict what is going to happen in the next session. You can try to push it in a direction without railroading it, but you cannot attempt to predict. You can do a little skeleton outline. That's totally fine. In fact, I'd recommend doing a skeleton outline for things you'd like to do next session, but they should be just that. Things you would like to do next session. Because for me, a really big thing that I have sort of learned is that player agency is key to enjoyment, especially when determining where their stories are going to go, especially if they haven't figured out what their backstory is. Letting them make something up is really good because that organic kind of genesis of something new is so much better in game than it is out of game. And encouraging players to be a part of your world by making it super accessible and changeable in small enough ways that it doesn't upset the tone of the game, but makes them kind of pseudo DMs, like just little baby DMs, is really big to me. Because then you can start taking the world seriously, and then you can start making these decisions that you wouldn't normally be able to make because people are now invested, because you've given them that chance. Unless you, I mean, obviously, session 0 is hugely important. Talk to everyone about everything before you go into it. But if you're like, okay, this is a serious grimdark campaign, that better be what it is, you know? But again, don't take yourself too seriously. Understand you're going to make mistakes. Understand you're going to set up some plot threads that aren't going to work out. And that's fine, because I would guarantee you, whatever mistakes happen, you're not going to look back on them as mistakes if they're just you trying to plan stuff. Because whatever the players come up with will be genuinely more fun and genuinely better for the story because they did it. You're working around them, and they're working around you. It's this symbiotic relationship as opposed to one over the other.
Yeah, 100%. I found that a lot of the best role-playing moments are player-initiated rather than me-initiated, like, oh, this is going to be this cool set piece or this conversation that I'm planning. It's always more interesting when they say, I want to go have this conversation, and you're like, ooh, okay, you know, what's going to happen? What are they going to say? Yeah, I always find those to be the most rewarding.
100%.
So, I love it.
I think, one more thing, if you're comfortable with it, you should try DMing. Because being behind the table gives you so much more perspective of what happens. Ever since I've DM'd, I now try to be like, I try to think about what the DM's going through, and then I try to start those conversations. Because I know, in my games, I would really like it if a player did that there, you know? And I love players who do that. I love players who are DMs. They are so great. They know exactly what I want in a game. Yeah, that's just kind of it. Try to go behind the screen if you're comfortable with it, because it can open up, 1, a love for DMing, which is great, and 2, a new perspective when you're a player.
Yeah, awesome. So, Sam, where can people find more about your account, your show, your Patreon, your Kickstarter, all of the stuff?
You can find the funny jokes and posts about the podcast when they come out at our Twitter, which is at our Roleplaying. That is ROLL, like dice playing. Haha, it's a funny joke. That is where you can find that stuff. Additionally, our website is linked there. Our website has everything you could possibly want from us. It has a defunct wiki page even that I need to update. It's got discount codes. It's got our merch if you want to buy Roleplaying and Roleplaying booty shorts, which I still need to do, as well as the Kickstarter, the Patreon, whole shebang. As for me, Sam Comerford, you can find my account at samcomerford24 on Twitter, where I post things. Not going to put a label on them because I can't. I post stuff there. I'd appreciate it if you check those out.
Awesome. I'll include links to all that stuff in the episode notes as usual. All right. Well, Sam, it's been a ton of fun. Like I said, I've been following your account probably since the first month of me being active and working on this project. I'm pretty sure I stumbled upon it, and I've been following it ever since. So it's been fun watching your growth and your journey, and also making another friend out here. So appreciate you coming on, and really enjoy everything you've been putting out so far.
I appreciate being on the prestigious How Not to DM podcast. This has been awesome.
Thank you for listening to How Not to DM. Now it's time for a sneak peek into next week's guest, Nathan of Reckless Attack.
Like I said, it's so easy for people to discount your stuff. There's so much content out there. There's so many podcasts out there, streams and games and whatever. And you can't be the first one to undercut yourself. You have to start from a position of positivity, of enthusiasm. You have to celebrate what makes you unique and interesting. You're not just a 5e podcast. You're not just a bunch of idiots around the table who are friends and decided to throw an iPhone in the middle of the table. You are whatever gets you guys excited about your game. Someone else is going to be excited about it too. And that's what you got to hit.
To hear more about Nathan's advice for marketing your work, whatever it is, about his commitment to quality in his content, and more, tune in next week. Remember to check out my Patreon if you haven't already for even more sneak peeks. Next time you get the chance, share this episode with your friends and family around your game table. Another great way to help me boost the show is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or rating the show on Spotify. I appreciate all of you for helping the show grow. Thank you to the team at T4C Studios for helping edit and produce this episode. My intro and outro music is by Danijel Zambo. The Quickfire Chaos music is by Exacat, and the Quickfire Chaos mood music is by Arcane Anthems. Check out the episode notes for more of their great work. And, as always, until next time, roll some nat 20s for me.